The year was 2087, and Earth had changed. Cities reached higher into the sky, oceans were cleaner, and humans had finally begun to heal their planet. But the most exciting change was that people now looked to the stars with real hope of meeting someone else. On a quiet Tuesday morning, the giant radio telescope in New Mexico picked up something strange. The signals came from Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth. They weren't random. They had patterns that only intelligent life could make. Captain Olivia Mason stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, Earth's newest and best exploration ship. At 42, she had the respect of everyone who served with her. Her short brown hair was starting to show gray, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "How long until we reach Proxima Centauri?" she asked, looking at the main screen showing stars streaming by. "3 more days, Captain," said Sam Rodriguez, the ship's engineer. His hands moved quickly over the control panel. "The new engines are working better than expected." Olivia nodded. She walked around the bridge, checking in with her team. Lieutenant Jack Powell, a tall man with broad shoulders, monitored the weapons systems. He never smiled much, but Olivia trusted him with her life. "Any unusual activity ahead?" she asked. "Nothing yet, Captain," Jack replied. "But I'm keeping all sensors at maximum range." At the science station, Dr. Amanda Curtis studied the latest data from Proxima Centauri. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she hadn't slept much since they left Earth. "The signals are getting clearer," Amanda said with excitement in her voice. "They're definitely artificial. Someone made them on purpose." Communications Officer Zoe Campbell joined them, her dark skin glowing under the bridge lights. "I've been working on translating the patterns. They seem to repeat every 42 minutes. It could be a greeting or a warning. Too early to tell." Olivia felt a mix of excitement and worry. Humanity had waited for this moment for centuries, but first contact came with risks. The United Council had chosen her crew carefully for this mission, the first humans to meet alien life. 3 days later, the UES Horizon entered the Proxima Centauri system. They saw something that made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. A massive structure orbited the system's habitable planet. It was clearly artificial, a space station bigger than anything humans had built. "My God," whispered Sam. "Look at the size of that thing." "Scan it," ordered Olivia. "I want to know everything about it." Amanda worked quickly at her station. "It's made of materials we don't recognize. The energy readings are off the charts. Captain, whoever built this is far more advanced than we are." Just then, a signal came through to the ship. Zoe jumped slightly as her console lit up. "Captain, they're hailing us. The computer is translating. It's in a language the computer has never seen, but somehow it can understand parts of it." "Put it through," said Olivia, straightening her uniform. A face appeared on the main screen. It looked almost human, but not quite. The skin was pale blue, with patterns that seemed to shift slightly. The eyes were large and completely black. "Greetings, visitors from Earth," the being said, its mouth moving strangely with the words. "We are the Salarians. We have been watching your world with great interest." Olivia stepped forward. "I am Captain Olivia Mason of the United Earth Ship Horizon. We come in peace, seeking friendship." The Salarian smiled, showing teeth that were too perfect. "We welcome you, Captain. Our civilizations have much to share with each other." As the crew celebrated this historic moment, Dr. Curtis moved closer to Olivia. "Captain," she whispered, "I noticed something odd about their biology from these readings. Their cellular structure suggests some kind of parasitic or symbiotic relationship. I need more data, but something doesn't feel right." Olivia kept her face neutral as she continued speaking with the Salarian leader. First contact had been made, but Amanda's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. 6 weeks after first contact, Earth was buzzing with excitement. The news of intelligent alien life had united humanity in a way nothing else could. The United Council had set up a special department just for Salarian relations, and Director Frank Miller was in charge of it all. Frank was a serious man with graying hair and a voice that commanded respect. He had been a diplomat for 30 years, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this. Today, he stood in a large meeting room at the United Council headquarters in Geneva, waiting for the Salarian representatives. "Remember, this is a historic moment," Frank told his team. "The Salarians are offering to share technology that could advance us by centuries." The doors opened, and 3 Salarians entered. They moved with strange grace, as if they were lighter than they should be. Their leader, who called himself Zetix, bowed slightly. "We are honored to continue our discussions," Zetix said. His voice had an odd musical quality to it. "My people are eager to establish a stronger bond with humans." The meeting began, and the Salarians showed images of their technology. Ships that could travel faster than the UES horizon, medical devices that could cure diseases humans still struggled with, and energy sources that would make pollution a thing of the past. "All we ask in exchange," Zetix said, "is access to your historical archives, particularly those about disease management. Your species has overcome so many biological challenges. We find this fascinating." Frank nodded eagerly. "Of course. Medical knowledge should be shared for the benefit of all." On a screen to the side of the room, Captain Olivia Mason watched the meeting from the UES horizon, which had remained in orbit around Earth since returning from Proxima Centauri. Her face showed concern. "They seem particularly interested in our histories of parasitic infections," she said. "That matches with Dr. Curtis's observations about their biology." Frank frowned at the interruption. "Captain Mason, the Salarians have been nothing but helpful. Your concerns, while noted, seem unfounded." Olivia tried again. "Sir, respectfully, we should be cautious. Dr. Curtis has found unusual biological markers in the samples we collected. There's evidence suggesting the Salarians may have a complex relationship with microscopic organisms in their bodies." Zetix turned his black eyes toward the screen. "Captain, you misunderstand. Our biology is different from yours. Yes, we have beneficial organisms that live within us, giving us advantages. It is why we are interested in how humans fought parasites, to understand how our symbiotic relationships might be perceived by others." The explanation sounded reasonable, but something still felt off to Olivia. Later that day, engineer Sam Rodriguez examined a small device the Salarians had given as a gift. He had taken it apart in his lab on the horizon. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, showing Olivia a microscopic component under a scanner. "These parts aren't just technology. They have biological elements that seem designed to monitor biological data." Olivia took this information to the United Council the next day. The full council of 12 leaders from around Earth gathered to hear her concerns. "We believe the Salarians may be collecting biological information about humans for unknown purposes," she explained. "We should limit contact until we understand more." Chairwoman Linda Harris shook her head. "Captain Mason, your caution is admirable, but the benefits of this relationship are too great to jeopardize with unproven suspicions." Only one council member, Alan Wright, spoke up in support of Olivia. "Perhaps we should at least increase security protocols," he suggested. He was quickly outvoted. The council decided to move forward with the next phase of relations, a cultural exchange program that would bring Salarians to Earth in larger numbers. As Olivia left the council chamber, she felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. Humanity was rushing into something they didn't understand, and her warnings were being ignored. "We need to prepare," she told Dr. Curtis over a secure line. "I think Earth just made a terrible mistake." 2 weeks after the council meeting, strange things began to happen on the UES horizon. Crew members who had visited the Salarian homeworld started to report odd dreams. They saw blue skies turning dark and felt like they were being watched by something they couldn't see. Communications officer Zoe Campbell was the first to mention it during breakfast in the ship's dining area. "I keep dreaming about voices telling me to trust the Salarians completely," she said, pushing her food around on her plate. "It feels so real that when I wake up, I can still hear them for a few seconds." Lieutenant Jack Powell nodded. I've had similar dreams, and sometimes during the day, I see flashes of light that nobody else notices. Captain Olivia Mason listened with growing concern. She called Dr. Amanda Curtis to the medical bay immediately. "I want blood samples from everyone who visited the Salarian planet," Olivia ordered. "Something isn't right." Amanda worked through the night, examining the samples under powerful microscopes. What she found made her hands shake. She called the captain at 3 a.m. "You need to see this now," she said, her voice tight with worry. Under the microscope, tiny organisms moved through the blood samples. They were so small they had been missed in earlier tests. They looked like a cross between a virus and a parasite. "They're in everyone who spent more than an hour on the Salarian world," Amanda explained, "including 4 council members who visited last week." Olivia's face turned pale. "Are they dangerous?" "They seem to attach to neurons. They could be affecting thoughts, maybe even controlling them slightly. I need more time to study them, but this could explain the dreams and hallucinations." Olivia didn't wait. She ordered a complete quarantine of the UES Horizon. No one could leave or board the ship without her direct approval. Then she sent an encrypted message to Earth, addressed only to Council Member Alan Wright, the one person who had supported her concerns. The message contained all of Amanda's findings and a clear warning. The Salarians might be attempting some kind of biological infiltration. Alan brought the evidence to an emergency council meeting, but the reception was cold. Chairwoman Linda Harris seemed particularly dismissive. "These claims are ridiculous," Linda said, her eyes looking slightly unfocused. "The Salarians have given us no reason to distrust them. Captain Mason is obviously suffering from space isolation syndrome." Alan looked around the room in disbelief. "Did none of you see the images of these organisms? They're in the blood of our own people." Linda smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Council Member Wright, perhaps you should take some time off. You seem stressed." The vote was 11-1 to continue with the Salarian exchange program. Back on the UES Horizon, Olivia received the news with a heavy heart. She called her senior officers to the conference room. "Earth won't listen," she told them. "Something is affecting the Council's judgment. I believe these organisms may already be influencing their decisions." "What do we do?" Sam Rodriguez asked. "We keep digging," Olivia replied. "Amanda, focus on finding a way to detect and remove these organisms. Jack, I want security protocols tightened. No one comes or goes without being screened. And Zoe, monitor all communications from Earth for any patterns that seem off." As they left the conference room, a message came through from Proxima Centauri. The Salarians were proposing a large-scale cultural exchange program. They wanted to send 500 representatives to Earth within the month. Even more troubling, the United Council had already approved the request. "They're moving too fast," Olivia said quietly. "Whatever they're planning, they want to get as many of their people to Earth as possible." She looked out the viewport at Earth below, beautiful and blue and completely unaware of the danger it was in. "We're running out of time." 6 months passed since the first Salarians arrived on Earth. Lieutenant Jack Powell had returned home 3 months ago. Captain Mason had sent him back with a secret mission: to watch and gather information from the ground. Jack walked through the busy streets of Chicago, noticing how many Salarians now moved freely among humans. They were treated like celebrities, with people gathering around them for pictures and asking for autographs. But Jack saw something others missed. He saw the slight changes in the people who spent time with the Salarians. His sister, Dr. Nicole Powell, was waiting for him at a small coffee shop away from the main streets. Nicole was a neurologist at Chicago Memorial Hospital, and she hadn't been happy when Jack asked her to study brain scans of patients who had close contact with Salarians. "You were right," she said quietly when he sat down. She pushed a tablet across the table. "Look at these scans." The images showed tiny spots throughout the brain tissue, concentrated in areas that controlled decision-making. "I found the same pattern in 12 different patients," Nicole continued. "All of them have spent time with Salarians in the last month. and all of them show subtle behavioral changes. What kind of changes? Jack asked. They become more supportive of Salarian initiatives. They defend Salarians in conversations, even when it doesn't make sense to do so. One man who used to be afraid of government control now happily shares all his personal information with Salarian research teams. Jack nodded. It's happening all over. The parasites are changing how people think, making them trust the Salarians without question. They left the coffee shop and walked to Nicole's lab, where she had more evidence to show him. On the way, they passed a construction site where Salarians were building what they called a cultural center. Jack noticed unusual equipment being installed. In the lab, Nicole showed him a sample of the parasite under a microscope. It's incredibly sophisticated, she explained. It attaches to neurons and releases chemicals that affect decision-making. But it's subtle. People still feel like themselves. They just happen to agree with everything the Salarians want. Jack's secure phone buzzed. It was a message from Captain Mason on the UES horizon. She had discovered something important. The message was brief but chilling. Salarians have done this before. Found records on their homeworld. 3 other civilizations. All gone. Jack showed Nicole the message. We need to warn people, Nicole said. We've tried, Jack replied. The media won't run the story. Government officials won't listen. Most of the people in power have had close contact with Salarians. They're probably already infected. Just then, Jack's old military friend, Ben Lawson, arrived at the lab. Ben worked security at the United Council's North American headquarters. You won't believe what I heard today, Ben said, his voice low. The Council is planning to allow Salarians access to our defense networks. They're calling it a gesture of trust. The 3 of them looked at each other in horror. If the Salarians gained control of Earth's defenses, resistance would become impossible. Jack tried to send a message to Council member Alan Wright, their only ally in the government, but received an automatic response. Council member Wright is on indefinite leave due to health concerns. They're silencing anyone who questions them, Jack said. We're running out of allies. Nicole sat down heavily in her chair. What do we do now? Jack thought about Captain Mason and the crew of the Horizon, still in orbit, still free from Salarian influence. We build a resistance, he said firmly. There must be others who see what's happening. People who are naturally immune or who have avoided contact. We find them, we organize, and we fight back. Ben nodded. I know some military personnel who've been asking questions. And I can test people to see if they're infected, Nicole added. Jack looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, where Salarian ships now regularly flew between their newly constructed buildings. Earth didn't listen to the warnings, he said. Now we have to find a way to save it anyway. 1 month after Jack and Nicole Powell began their resistance efforts, they had gathered 37 people they could trust. They met in an old bomb shelter beneath a closed factory outside Chicago. The air was stale, but it was safe from Salarian monitoring. We have news from Dr. Curtis on the horizon, Jack told the group. She's found a way to detect the neural parasites with a simple blood test, and she's working on something to kill them without harming the host. A murmur of hope passed through the small crowd. Among them was retired Admiral Paul Bennett, a man in his 60s with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He had been one of the first to join the resistance. What about Captain Mason? The Admiral asked. Is she still safe in orbit? Not for long, Jack replied. The United Council has ordered the Horizon to dock for routine maintenance. We all know what that means. Nicole stepped forward. Her medical coat was wrinkled from days without proper rest. I've been studying the blood samples from everyone here, and I found something interesting. 5 of you show no signs of infection despite direct contact with Salarians. She pointed to a chart on a makeshift screen. These 5 people all share a genetic marker related to autoimmune disorders. It seems the parasites can't survive in hosts with this specific genetic variation. How common is this marker in the general population? Asked Ben Lawson. About 12%, Nickel answered. It's not enough to stop the Salarians, but it explains why some people remain unaffected. Just then, a young woman named Kelly Chen rushed into the shelter. She worked at a satellite communication center and had access to secure channels. "Captain Mason is coming," she said breathlessly. "The Horizon launched a modified shuttle. They're making a covert landing tonight at the old airfield north of the city." The news energized the group. Captain Mason had become a symbol of hope for the resistance. That night, Jack, Nicole, and Admiral Bennett drove to the abandoned airfield. The shuttle landed silently in the darkness, its engines modified to reduce heat signatures and noise. Captain Olivia Mason stepped out, followed by Dr. Amanda Curtis and 3 other crew members. They all looked tired but determined. "It's good to see friendly faces," Olivia said, embracing Jack. "The Horizon is in lockdown mode. Engineer Rodriguez and a skeleton crew are keeping it in orbit, but they'll need to abandon ship soon. The Salarians are sending vessels to force it down." Inside a hangar, they shared information. Dr. Curtis showed them a small device she had developed. "This can neutralize the parasites," she explained. "But it has to be administered directly into the bloodstream, and we don't have nearly enough for everyone." Admiral Bennett studied a map of Chicago, where strange structures had been built by the Salarians in a specific pattern. "These aren't cultural centers," he said. "Based on my military experience, this looks like a network of amplifiers. They form a grid across the city." Dr. Curtis agreed. "The parasites respond to specific frequencies. These structures could be designed to strengthen the parasites' control over infected hosts." Captain Mason looked around at the small group. "We're going to need more help. There must be military personnel who are genetically immune or who have avoided contact." "There are," Admiral Bennett confirmed. "I've been quietly reaching out. We have allies in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Not many, but some." Olivia nodded. "Good, because we're going to need firepower when the Salarians realize we're fighting back." Outside the hangar, they could see the lights of Chicago in the distance, and above the city center, a massive Salarian ship hovered, its blue lights pulsing in a hypnotic pattern. "They're getting bolder," Jack observed. "They barely try to hide their presence anymore." "That's because they think they've won," Olivia said. "But they don't understand humans very well. We don't give up, even when the odds are impossible." Nichols smiled for the first time in weeks. "So we have a plan." "We do," Olivia replied. "We're going to show the Salarians exactly why they should have taken my warnings seriously." 3 days after Captain Mason arrived on Earth, the Resistance was ready to act. They gathered in an underground command center that Admiral Bennett had kept secret since his military days. Maps and computer screens covered the walls, showing the locations of Salarian structures across Chicago. "The main amplifier is here," Jack said, pointing to a tall building in the center of the city. "If we can shut it down, the entire network will be weakened." Dr. Curtis opened a metal case containing dozens of small injectors, filled with a clear blue liquid. "This is our best weapon," she explained. "It targets the parasites and destroys them without harming the human host. But we need to get it into the water supply to reach as many infected people as possible." Nichols studied the chemical formula on a tablet. "The water treatment plant has minimal security. I can get a team in there." Captain Mason nodded. "Good. While Nichols' team handles the treatment plant, I'll lead a group to infiltrate the United Council headquarters. We need to secure their communication systems and broadcast the truth about the Salarians. And I'll take a strike team to disable the main amplifier," Jack added. "We have the signal disruptor ready." The signal disruptor was a device engineer Rodriguez had designed before leaving the Horizon. It would emit a frequency that would interfere with the amplifier's signals, temporarily blocking their control over the parasites. Admiral Bennett looked at the 3 teams. "Remember, we only get one chance at this. The moment the Salarians realize what we're doing, they'll respond with force." At midnight, the plan was put into motion. Nickel and 4 resistance members, all wearing utility worker uniforms, entered the water treatment facility. They moved quickly to the main processing tanks. "We'll add the agent here," Nickel said, pointing to the intake filters. "It will spread through the entire city water system within hours." Across the city, Jack led his team toward the central amplifier. They wore civilian clothes and carried their equipment in ordinary bags. The building was guarded by both human security and Salarians. "Remember, the guards are victims too," Jack reminded his team. "Non-lethal force only." Using stun weapons, they quickly subdued the guards and entered the building. Inside, they found a massive machine pulsing with blue energy. It filled an entire floor, with cables running up through the ceiling and down into the ground. "This is bigger than we expected," Ben Lawson whispered. "Look at the power readings." Jack started placing signal disruptors around the base of the machine. "We need to hurry. They'll have detected the security breach by now." At the United Council headquarters, Captain Mason and Admiral Bennett faced the toughest challenge. The building was heavily guarded, and they knew many inside would be deeply under Salarian control. "We need to reach the broadcast center on the 15th floor," Olivia said. "From there, we can override all Earth communications." They used access codes that Admiral Bennett still remembered from his service days. But halfway to their goal, alarms began to sound throughout the building. "The Salarians know," Admiral Bennett said grimly. "They're responding faster than we anticipated." Above the city, the massive Salarian ships began to move. Their peaceful facade was dropping. Weapon ports opened along their hulls, glowing with energy. In the treatment plant, Nicole and her team had just finished adding the anti-parasite agent to the water when Salarian soldiers burst in. "Run," Nicole shouted. "The job is done." At the amplifier building, Jack activated the disruptors. The machine's blue glow flickered and dimmed. Across the city, people stopped what they were doing, looking confused as if waking from a dream. But the victory was short-lived. The Salarian ships fired warning shots into the sky, their weapons far more powerful than anything Earth possessed. A voice boomed across all communication channels, speaking in the calm, musical tones of the Salarians. "Humans, your resistance is futile and disappointing. We offered friendship, and you respond with aggression. Now we will take what we want by force." The Salarians had abandoned their subtle approach. Full-scale invasion had begun. The sky over Chicago filled with Salarian ships. People ran through the streets in panic as smaller vessels descended toward the ground. But something unexpected was happening. The anti-parasite agent that Nichols' team had added to the water was working faster than anyone had hoped. All across the city, people who had been under Salarian influence suddenly found their minds clear again. They looked up at the ships with anger instead of admiration. In the United Council headquarters, Captain Mason and Admiral Bennett fought their way to the broadcast center. 3 council members tried to stop them, but they too began to show signs of the parasite losing its grip. "The water system," Olivia realized. "The agent is already spreading." They reached the broadcast room and locked the doors behind them. Admiral Bennett sat at the main console, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. "I'm connecting to all Earth communication networks," he said. "Military, civilian, everything." Captain Mason leaned into the microphone. "People of Earth, this is Captain Olivia Mason. The Salarians are not our friends. They have been using neural parasites to control human minds and prepare us for invasion. But we now have a way to fight back." Her message went out to every screen and speaker on the planet. She explained about the parasites, the amplifiers, and the truth about the Salarians' history of conquering other worlds. Jack and his team had escaped the amplifier building just before Salarian soldiers arrived. They watched from a safe distance as their disruptors continued to weaken the network. "It's working," Ben said, pointing to people in the street who were shaking their heads as if waking up. "They're breaking free." The Salarian ships began firing on key military installations. They clearly intended to cripple Earth's defenses before the full invasion. But as more humans regained their free will, resistance grew. Military bases that had been under Salarian influence were now responding with anti-aircraft fire. Captain Mason made her way to the United Council's secure underground facility. There, she accessed Earth's most classified defense system, a network of orbital platforms that had been built in secret as a last resort against alien threats. Authorization code Mason Alpha 79. She said into the command console. Activate Sentinel Protocol. Around the Earth, hidden defensive satellites powered up. They had been designed based on reverse-engineered Salarian technology from the UES Horizon's first contact mission. The Salarian commander's voice came through all channels again. This resistance is pointless. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Maybe not our conventional weapons, Captain Mason replied. But we learned more from your technology than you realized. The Sentinel satellites fired, their beams cutting through several Salarian vessels. For the first time, the alien showed fear. In space, the remaining crew of the UES Horizon watched the battle unfold. Engineer Rodriguez had received Captain Mason's signal and activated the ship's experimental weapon systems. For Earth, he said, as the Horizon joined the fight, its engines pushing to full power as it rammed into one of the largest Salarian ships. All across the planet, humans who had been freed from the parasites joined the fight. They picked up weapons, they manned defense systems, they fought with a fury born from the knowledge that they had been controlled and used. The Salarian fleet, never having faced a species that broke free of their control, began to retreat. Their plan had always depended on subversion, not direct combat against a united enemy. 3 days later, when the last Salarian ship fled the solar system, Captain Mason stood with her allies in what remained of the United Council chamber. They came thinking we would be easy to conquer, she said, that we would ignore the warnings until it was too late. They were wrong. Admiral Bennett nodded. Now we need to make sure no one else makes the same mistake. We should establish a warning system for other civilizations that might encounter the Salarians. The Sentinel Protocol, Olivia agreed. Not just a defense system, but a promise to protect others from what we experienced. As they looked out at the damage to their city, there was sadness for what had been lost, but also pride. Humanity had paid a heavy price, but they had won their freedom. And they would make sure the Salarians paid the ultimate price for underestimating human determination.